Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Ashley Dauphiné Chivitello, and I'm presenting today a small portion of a much larger project examining linguistic and social practices among women in Brazil with an intersex genetic condition known as Turner syndrome. My present talk focuses on sociophonetic aspects of speech, particularly fundamental frequency. Although I want to frame from the get-go by saying that this research is complemented by several years of ethnographic work within this specific community that I don't go into here for the interest of time. My main interest today is in examining the place of the body and biomedical practices in interaction with fundamental frequency for individuals with Turner syndrome. In other words, I'm interested in how both visible and invisible aspects of the intersex body are implicated within linguistic practice and linguistic theory. The main question I ask today is, what do height, hormones, and the voice have to do with being a woman? To answer the questions posed today, I have the following objectives. One, to provide a more nuanced or complex understanding of the female voice via individuals with Turner syndrome. Two, to examine the interactions between voice pitch and biomedical variables like height and growth hormone treatment. And three, to account for linguistic practices, specifically voice pitch, in an intersex population. So first and foremost, what is Turner syndrome? Turner syndrome is one of the most common intersex conditions. It occurs in around 1 out of 3,000 female-identified births. Turner syndrome individuals are born with just one sex chromosome, an X, instead of two, XX or XY, as you can see in the karyotype or map of the chromosomes presented here on this slide. So this produces a variety of effects on the body, such as short stature bordering on dwarfism, failure to undergo puberty, infertility, underdeveloped ovaries or gonadal tissue, a lack of naturally occurring sex hormones, and other physical and cognitive effects. These effects can lead some to have a precarious relationship to womanhood and femininity, with many of my participants reporting to feel like second-class women. Of my participants on a social and gendered level, almost all identified as women, even if many or most were uncomfortable with the implications of this label, and one identified as a man. The most common intervention for Turner syndrome involves daily injections of growth hormone between the ages of 8 and 16 years, the replacement of feminizing hormones such as estrogen and progesterone, and occasionally surgery to remove ovarian or gonadal tissue. All of these procedures usually occur at a young age, usually before children are able to understand or give consent for these processes, mostly in the interest of things like growth hormone will not have an effect on growth after certain age and when the growth plates fuse. In terms of linguistic and sociolinguistic theory, sociolinguists and phoneticians have begun to study gender non-normativity in the voice, with work suggesting a greater degree of variation than previously thought. Recent work has examined trans and non-binary linguistic practices. Work such as Lal Zimin, Jenny Davis, Ariana Steele's work. This body of work overall has argued that gender differences in the voice should be understood through the lens of sociolinguistic style and local community practices. Other strands of sociolinguistics research has begun to explore the role of the body beyond just the voice, bringing us to examine language as not just the speech stream itself, but as part of a larger semiotic system. Intersex bodies have long functioned as a theoretical keystone for understanding the performative nature of gender. With few exceptions, however, research on intersex communities has been absent from linguistics and the social sciences more broadly. No work to date in linguistics has examined intersex populations, with the notable exception of Brian King's work. Therefore, I argue that intersex populations like Turner syndrome provide unique vantage point to examine the questions posed today. So, as Turner syndrome isn't limited to a specific geographic part of the globe, you might be wondering why Brazil. Rio de Janeiro in particular, where I conducted over 20 months of fieldwork for this research, is a city of intense racial, class, gendered, and geographic contrasts, where the body is frequently on display, publicly and discursively. As a common Brazilian saying goes, não tem feio, só tem pobre, or there's no ugly people, only poor people. And this suggests in Brazil that there is a more malleable sense of bodily norms. For those bodies deemed non-normative, like the Turner body, this social context can result in increased pressure to pursue medical intervention and assimilate to gendered expectations. I also want to disclose that I too share a Turner syndrome diagnosis and have been a member of support groups for Turner syndrome across Latin America for the past 12 years. And I disclosed this with you all because my own diagnosis was key to developing trust with participants. Several had never discussed having Turner syndrome outside of a medical context before, not even sometimes with siblings or other family members. And I also disclosed this in conjunction with calls from within linguistics and anthropology for greater researcher transparency. So I focus on height in this work for several reasons. Firstly, height is one of the most salient or discussed topics within the Turner syndrome communities. You can see some examples of memes that often get shared within Turner syndrome groups here. With the average height of those who don't receive growth hormone around 1.3 meters or 4'3". Secondly, much of the scholarship on intersex communities has focused on more intimate or private parts of the intersex embodiment, particularly related to sexual development and genitalia. And I focus on height to show how intersexuality can intersex with gender in other less obvious ways. So this leads us to examine height and growth hormone from a phonetic perspective within the Brazilian context. For the phonetic analysis of voice pitch, I recorded 40 participants total, 20 individuals with Turner syndrome, 20 non-Turner individuals. And while they read the passage O Vento Sul, or the South Wind, which is the Brazilian Portuguese equivalent of the Rainbow Passage. All of the participants were from Rio de Janeiro and came from a wide range of neighborhoods and backgrounds, and ranged in age between 18 and 55 years old. On the right-hand side of the slide here is a list of the selected words from the reading of O Vento Sul, which I then analyzed. Moving on to the next slide, I extracted a total of 21 tokens per speaker. In Prat, 3 tokens per vowel for the 7 oral vowels in Portuguese. All of the vowels were in a stressed syllable position, in a CVC or interconsonant position, but not next to a nasal consonant. I then measured each vowel's fundamental frequency, coded the data, and ran linear mixed effects regression models to analyze the relationship between F0 and height. Height, hormones, karyotype, with speaker and token as random effect. I then ran several models to compare the effects of different variables among, first, all participants, then among just individuals with XX and XO karyotypes, and then those with just XO karyotypes. So we can see that the distribution of mean F0 varies according to chromosome type, also known as karyotype. So on the x-axis here, we have karyotype, and then on the y-axis, frequency. Participants with an XO karyotype, Turner syndrome, had the highest average F0, followed by participants with XX karyotypes at a little bit lower. And at the lowest end, we had participants with XY karyotypes. So in the best fit model, karyotype was a significant predictor of F0 with a p-value of 0.022, and you can see the averages for F0 here on the left. I then ran a second model to see if differences in pitch between XO and XX participants was also significant. So in the best fit model for this group, karyotype was also selected as a significant predictor of F0 with a resulting p-value of 0.035. These initial results suggest not only a gendered difference in F0, but also a difference based on chromosome type, further established by the observed difference we see here between Turner and non-Turner bodies. I then examined differences in participants with Turner syndrome who had received growth hormone and those who had not. Participants who did not receive growth hormone had a slightly higher F0. Despite this difference in the descriptive statistics, when I ran regression models, the best fit model did not include hormone as a significant predictor of F0. This is a bit of a surprising result, given that growth hormone is a type of steroid which can cause the lowering of voice pitch and a thickening of the vocal cords, so we might have anticipated some type of correlation there. Moving on to the next slide in this graph, which examines only individuals with Turner syndrome. On the x-axis, we have height in centimeters, increasing as it goes to the right, and on the y-axis, frequency. In examining height, we can see that as participants' height increased, the mean F0 decreased. So in the mixed effects regression model, height did turn out to be a significant variable with a p-value of 0.007. So to summarize these quantitative results, there was a statistically significant relationship between F0 and karyotype, and F0 and height, but not growth hormone. This is surprising given that we might expect height and growth hormone to be correlated on some level. Turner participants overall had the highest F0, followed by participants with XX karyotype, and then XY. So in terms of height, as participant height increased, F0 decreased. In examining the results today, we can see two related biological and biomedical markers with different levels of interactions in many ways are mediated by doctor and parent decisions. Given the nature of height, in particular for Turner syndrome women, the interaction between height and pitch is not necessarily surprising. So even among participants whose bodies are closer to established norms of femininity and womanhood, height remains a salient feature for many of those with Turner syndrome, many of whom report on a precarious relationship with womanhood on both a physiological and social level. A contextualization of the role of height in constructing womanhood for both women with Turner syndrome and in broader social contexts allow us to look at the role of the body in linguistic practice from a different perspective. The question of how we group or classify individuals has been fundamental to the fields of sociolinguistics and linguistic anthropology. Such concepts such as sorting participants into binary gender identifiers often form the unspoken bias of most linguistics research. That is, the very notion of how we define languages and how we understand linguistic change is based on how we understand different groups of speakers and their interactions. In recentering the physical body, my intent is not to essentialize a particular embodiment. For the intersex individual, however, bodies are subject to a larger public domain of medical, social, and gendered commentary. To ignore these realities in considering the way the body shapes our experiences with others in linguistic practice, particularly in the case of intersex individuals, would be to miss a larger proportion of social interactions and how participants understand themselves. It would serve, therefore, for linguists to consider the ways the physical body, both visible and invisible aspects, can play a role in both identity and linguistic practice. So thank you all for your attention today. And if you have any further questions or want to talk about my research, I'm happy to receive emails, Twitter, social media, and here are some of my works cited. All right, thank you so much.